Hello and welcome to this video on the difference between venom, poisons and toxins. The three words venom, poison and toxin are often used interchangeably, sometimes rightly and often wrong. The short and somewhat pithy explanation is that if you bite it and die, then it's poison. If it bites you and you die, it's venomous. Toxins are, deadly excretion that can be in any living organism and not necessarily excreted either. This means both a venom and poison are technically a toxin. While a somewhat facetious definition, this does summarize the key points. The details are where things somewhat get more complicated and often stuck. Let's use a relatively simple example to highlight the complexity. A platypus is venomous, but they don't bite you. Even if they do bite you, it will hurt, but it will not likely penetrate the skin. After all, they have a bill, not necessarily a beak. Instead, it has, let's say, spurs on its feet, and these are what would penetrate your skin, and technically those are venomous. Therefore, biting is not needed. It wouldn't be surprising if a platypus were to bite you, since it's an Australian native animal, but that's a different matter entirely. A better definition for venom is that it is a chemical forcefully or unwillingly entering your body. This is often in the form of injection, such as is the case with snakes or spider bites. By contrast, a poison is generally voluntarily consumed, whether you breathe it, drink it, eat it, or similar. You don't necessarily have to voluntarily consume it, after all, poisonous mushrooms are an example of this, but nonetheless, the general vector for entry is going to be oral or respiratory. Both poisons and venom are subsets of toxins. We then have the question of what about something like a poisonous frog, where you are going to touch them, you don't eat them, and they don't inject you with anything, therefore they don't fit into either category. Strictly speaking, because you weren't voluntarily poisoned, nor did you get forced into it, we're going to assume that it's some sort of dumb party dare. No, realistically speaking, the poisonous frog is something of an exception to the rule, and you'll understand better why this isn't so very important. Getting into more detail, starting with venom, we can begin a practical or working definition, and arguably a textbook definition. Venoms are a secretion that is going to be produced in a specialized gland in one animal and delivered to another animal, generally through the infliction of a wound. This is why spiders and snakes would definitely fit into the venom category, but obviously the frog would not. The venom itself would contain molecules that will disrupt normal physiological or biochemical functions. This is generally going to be necessary for the life of the organism. There is a slight caveat to this, and the caveat to this is more relating to relatively new research. As early as 2013, there was a publication by scientists proposing a third category of toxins other than the two we've mentioned, poisons and venom, these being toxins. These are products that don't require forceful entry into the body, so for example the infliction of the wound wouldn't be necessary, because these are sprayed. Spitting cobras are a perfect example of this. This third category is something of an exception again rather than a rule. Unfortunately, poison doesn't really get much more, let's say, clean in its definition. We still maintain the idea of getting into the body via swallowing, inhaling, or, in this instance, absorption through the skin. And this is arguably why the frog fits into the poison category rather than the venom category. It gets absorbed into the body and is a relatively passive process. It's important to note that animals can be both venomous and poisonous. For example, yet another Australian animal is the blue-ringed octopus. It is venomous when it bites you with its beak, which is a terrifying concept when you see an octopus's beak, but if it's only because you're touching the blue-ringed octopus, then it's poison. Either way, it injects you with the same product, toxin, and it's incredibly dangerous. And this brings us to the key point in the end. The distinctions between poisonous, venom, and toxin are largely arbitrary. They're not really all that important. You can use them somewhat usefully to define whether it's a passive or active process, but otherwise, they're pretty much indifferent to each other. Most languages have only one word for both of these, It's just that English is a shit language and it occasionally throws in words just to confuse people. Venom, poisons, and toxin is an example of this. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.